Welcome back to Hope Unscripted. I'm Jamie Dietrich, your host today, and I am joined by the amazing Shawnna Allbritton. She is our Director of Social Work Services at Hope Cancer Resources, and today we are talking about Chemobrain. So Shawnna, tell us a little bit about your role at Hope Cancer and a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the topic.
So I am the Director of Social Work for Hope Cancer Resources, and so I'm over the social workers that are in the clinics, and I'm also over the counselors that provide counseling to patients, family members, and caregivers. So I also see patients as well.
Big job.
There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. So today, you and I talked a little bit before the podcast, and we were talking about kind of the ugly side of cancer, like some of the things that people don't know or don't expect. And so one of those topics was what you called Chemobrain. So tell us what that is and a little bit about that.
So it's called Chemobrain, but I want to be very clear about the fact that it can be other things that cause this brain fog that people can experience. So it's not just related to patients that get chemo. It can also be due to radiation. It can also be to immunotherapies. And even in some instances, critical illnesses can cause this long-term brain fog that makes it very difficult to achieve or function at the level that you would have prior to this incident.
So as part of that, maybe the stress and anxiety of the different phases you go through with a diagnosis as well?
Absolutely. Stress definitely can contribute to the level of difficulty that you experience when you're trying to recall, especially when you're using short-term memory. Even things like finding a word can be sometimes very difficult.
Imagine that's really frustrating as well. You gave us a pretty good definition of chemobrain, like brain fog and just kind of not finding words, things of that nature. Are there other common symptoms that you would say maybe you've seen patients and they've described to you?
So commonly patients will talk about the fact that they can't remember things that were told to them. They can't remember events that happened in the day. They can't recall things that, like where they put their keys, and they've never had problems with that at all. Of course, word finding, and probably the biggest one would be the pace with which you can take in information and get something done. A lot of people that are trying to work while they're being treated for cancer can really struggle in this area. And like I said, word finding can also be a huge part of it. And it just really can rattle people when they feel like, they're not themselves.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know just on a normal basis, sometimes I forget a word or something like that, but then having the added stress, the anxiety, plus if you're going through chemo plan or radiation or whatever that is, I can imagine that would make it even more difficult.
Yes.
Are there other than just that, are there other specific, trying to think of what the word would be, other specifics that you've heard patients talk about around chemobrain?
A lot of times people will report that they wish they could just get back to being themselves. They just don't feel like themselves.
Yeah.
And then, when you're having problems remembering things and keeping up at work, it can bring up a lot of insecurities and make you feel like you're less than in this time when you're already very much struggling.
Well, you were talking about in the workforce, and I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking day-to-day life, and so I can't imagine still trying to work, going through all the challenges of a cancer diagnosis, and then experiencing something like this on top of that.
Many people do continue to work. Not all, but a lot of people will continue to work while they're doing cancer treatment if they can. A lot of times people will talk about the fact that it helps them feel better about going through this process, being in a place that and keeping a schedule that's familiar with them, which I encourage. but also you have to know that you are in a place that you've never been before, and that your body is trying very hard to work for you. Because chemo and radiation and even immunotherapies can be very hard.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be kind to yourself during this time.
Give yourself some grace.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a number one thing.
Now, I imagine as something like that starts, and it probably starts small, and then it's like a few bigger things. But what are the, like, when does someone go, is something more serious going on? Like, when do they see, maybe see their doctor or start asking more questions and not thinking it's just a side effect?
I think the biggest thing is that people need to loop their care team in as soon as possible, to let them know what the side effects are that they're experiencing. And you'll have that opportunity every time that you see your physician or your care team. Every time you do labs, you can mention it. And just keeping an eye on it and let them know that it is getting to a place. That is definitely going to be something that your physician is going to be noting and going to be keeping track of. But, they're going to tell you that it's something that you could probably expect when you start treatment, because there's going to be quite a bit of education that you're going to go through prior to starting treatment.
So from a counseling standpoint, what is some of the advice or thoughts that you have around that, how you would direct a patient?
So there's a couple. Number one would be, and we've already mentioned it, would be that you really, really, really need to give yourself as much grace as possible during this time and understand that this is where you're at. This is beyond your control, and that you're going to have to sit in this space that may be somewhat uncomfortable and give yourself this time and space to be the best that you can be. And stop comparing yourself to where you were before you had cancer. A lot of people like to do that. Well, if I can just get back to where I was before I had cancer. And I'm like, that's not fair to you to do that to yourself. So you are where you are. You need to sit in that, and it will get better. So know that it will get better.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would say is that you need to understand that if this is going to happen, that you should be able to think about things that you can use that can compensate for the fact that your short-term memory isn't what it has been. So that could be things like making sure that someone comes with you to your doctor's appointment and is hearing what you're hearing as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's really important.
It is very important. Setting reminders on your phone, whether that's for doctor's appointments, whether that's for medications, whether that's for other appointments that are important because your life is still going on at this point in time. Writing things down consistently and remembering that your cognition, your short-term cognition is not what it has been in the past, and you can't rely on it. And so you need to do that. Another thing that I would say is that a lot of times people will think that they're going to have a good day. They wake up, they have a lot of energy, they feel very hopeful. And so they're like, man, I feel so good. I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things done. Yeah. And they wear themselves out. And then the next day they feel awful. Oh, wow. And so, and then that can contribute to the fact that you've drained all the energy that you had, and now you're going to have a rougher day the next day, or maybe the next 2 or 3 days. And that can also contribute to that up and down that people can sometimes experience with their brain fog, the chemobrain. In that on those days when you're more tired, on the days when you're not feeling quite so great, it may be worse than other days. So it does come and go in the fact that there are going to be days when it is going to be a little bit worse than others, or better than others, however.
Yeah. When I was preparing for this, I was doing a little bit of reading, and one of the things that it said was keeping a routine. And so it kind of sounds like, based on what you were just saying, is instead of overdoing it on that day you feel really good, maybe keeping it steady and just kind of following a routine from day to day. That, do you find that that is helpful?
I think it is for most people in that are going through a lot of difficulty and a lot of stress in their lives, keeping a routine that is doable.
Yeah.
You know, so to speak. So on those days when you feel really good, just remember that it's almost like energy conservation. You've only got so much energy, and yes, you have a lot of energy today, but what is it going to look like tomorrow? And if you run yourself down today, then, you know, tomorrow might not be as good as it could have been had you just, you know, stuck to a relatively approachable and achievable goal for that day, and not, I think a lot of people get caught up in that, comparing themselves and getting very excited about feeling good, and so they're like, oh, I'm on my old self again, I can get all this stuff done, and it's not fair to yourself.
That sounds really hard. A couple of other things I read about was sleep and exercise. So tell us a little bit about those two things and how it relates to Chemobrain or helps. And
so sleep is so important to both your body and your mind in healing itself. And really what you're doing is you are fighting you know, the cancer, but you're also, you know, dealing with the chemo or the radiation or the immunotherapy, and your body is needing to heal. And so is your mind. And so sleep is absolutely paramount. If you can get 8 hours of sleep, that is the best. Naps are also, if you're in a place where, you know, you're not working, but you're experiencing chemobrain, naps can also be very helpful, you know, in the middle of the day. If you start to feel fatigued, you know, just lay down. Some people talk about, I can't rest during the day. And I'm like, just lay down and do something very calming for yourself for 30 minutes, just to kind of give you a rest break.
Would that factor in, and I don't mean to get you off subject, but would that factor in like maybe meditation? Would that be something that might help?
I think that meditation would be awesome, but I think that meditation also can help you know, bring your stress level down. And anytime that you can do that, you are in the winning category. Because, you know, when you're going through something like cancer treatment, the stress is incredible. So exercise is the other thing that you had mentioned. Take us back on to that. Exercise is very helpful. And so a lot of people will say, gosh, I mean, I can barely get out of bed and get to work, and you want me to exercise. And a lot of people will do what I've mentioned before, which is compare themselves to what they were before they had cancer. So if you're running a 5K every day and that's your way that you exercise, that's probably not what you're going to be doing when you have Chemobrain, when you're going through cancer treatment. So exercise can look like a walk. Exercise can look like gentle stretching. Exercise can look like restorative yoga. So it can be anything where you're stretching and moving gently. It doesn't have to be where you're reaching a certain amount of heartbeats per minute, you know, like you were, or running a certain amount of miles, or doing, you know, like what would be considered a much more higher strenuous exercise to count in this instance when your body is healing.
It almost sounds like all of these kind of resort back to a stress reduction, of just like giving yourself a brain break, giving your, you know, let your body get some blood flow.
I would agree with that 100%, in that stress reduction helps a lot. But I would also say that there are just going to be times when it's just going to be a hard day. And you also have to remember that chemo, particularly, is cumulative, meaning that if your treatment is, let's say, 6 treatments of chemo. Your body isn't going to clear the chemo from the first one to the second one, and from the second one to the third one, and so the third one from the fourth one. So it builds and builds and builds. Okay. And so as you get towards the end of treatment, you may find that your brain fog is thicker, that it's harder, that you really are starting to feel fatigued easier, that you really are starting to have difficulties or absolutely cannot multitask something. Yeah. Which is something that puts our brains in a certain amount of stress anyway. And that would be something I would definitely urge people not to do, is try to multitask when you're, experiencing Chemobrain, because it does put a lot of stress to remember to go back to that task when you stopped in the middle of it because you're doing something else and now you've got to do this. So, yes, lowering your stress is a huge part of this, but you also have to understand that as you gradually get through your treatment, you're just going to hit a point when it is just going to be harder. It's all going to be harder. Physically, it's going to be harder. Mentally, it's going to be harder.
So it's just getting your mindset ready and being prepared for those really hard days, cherishing, it sounds like, and giving yourself some grace on the days where you feel really good.
And then the other thing I would say on top of all of that would be, don't be afraid to ask for help from family, from friends, from caregivers. And it's okay to say no. Yeah. It's okay to say no and say, I just can't do that right now.
One of the hardest things sometimes is just saying no, or putting a boundary to where it's like, okay, that's just too much for me right now.
Yes.
I think we all struggle.
Whether that's, everybody does, but whether that's with work or with relationships, people want you to feel better, want to, make sure that they're including you in these kinds of things. And that's great. But there comes a point when it's just like, guys, I just can't do it today.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And that is okay.
Yeah. One of the other things that I thought was interesting, it said activities that help keep the brain engaged. And so it mentioned reading, puzzles, learning something new, and brain games. Is that something that you encourage or discourage? And what are your thoughts around it?
I think it's great if you can continue to do anything where you're learning something new, but don't make it something super complicated, and don't make it something where it's like, I'm going to learn this new cooking recipe where I have to be in the kitchen for the next 3 hours and it takes 83 ingredients. That's probably not going to be your best starting point. But, just doing simple things like word searches or Sudoku or things like that can be very helpful. But surprisingly, if we go back to something like exercise and you think about yoga, when you challenge your balance, you are testing your brain.
Interesting, yeah.
And when you bring your whichever left or right side past the midpoint, so if you were to just like put a line right down your body and you bring your left hand across the midpoint, you are also challenging your brain. So anytime that you do anything in yoga where you're crossing over from one side to the other, anytime where you're doing something where you're challenging your balance, you are challenging your brain.
Wow. I learned something new today.
Yeah, so
I didn't
there
even
you
think
go.
of it that way. Well, thank you for that. So thinking about this, we talked a little bit before when you should talk to your healthcare team, and really it sounds like just all along, as you experience any type of changes that are abnormal, to continue sharing that with your healthcare team and have that documented and tracked.
And I think the thing that we should probably go back and add to that, besides talking to your healthcare team, one of the things is that, okay, let's say that you meet with your doctor on a Monday and you're not going to meet with them again until the following week, but it's going to be on a Friday. So you're close to 2 weeks out, right? And you think about something on the following Monday when we've still got 4 days before you see your doctor. Write it down.
So you don't forget.
Write down the questions, write down the symptoms, write down things that other people have mentioned or noticed. You know, spouses will notice something sometimes before you will.
Yeah.
Coworkers may notice something before you will. And if they say it, then you need to be like, oh, okay, then I need to write that down and share that with my care team. But you'll get into the office and they're asking you stuff and you've got, you know, you're focusing on answering their questions, and then they'll walk out and you'll be like, well, shoot, I forgot to ask about this, and this. And so it can get really frustrating, and physicians' offices are really great about you know, being able to get in touch with them via, you know, my chart or you know, something where you can electronically do that. But I just think that there is something so valuable about the FaceTime that you get with your healthcare professionals. And if you've got your list in there and then they're able to address that while they're there, it just feels better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can help you kind of have that, like, if you get into the habit of that, it can just make it so you write everything down and then you've got a very clear, because there may be things that you forget. So then you can flip back through your stuff and be like, oh, we've already talked about that.
Yeah. As you were talking about that and you were saying write it down, in my head, I was thinking, I always have my phone on me. Everywhere I'm at, I have my purse and I have my phone. So in your notes section of your phone, maybe it's, you know, you can even do it by voice and make your notes. And then that way you go down and you just check the boxes when you're in the doctor's office. Because I was thinking, well, what if I leave my list at home?
Yes. No, you are exactly right. I almost think of my phone as an external brain because, I mean, like, who remembers a number anymore, right? Like a phone number?
I don't
like
even know my
nobody does.
husband's.
You just, exactly. you just go to contacts and you just like call this person.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
But in this case, using your phone, absolutely. You know, setting those reminders for medications or appointments or those kinds of things can be very helpful. And in this instance, making notes like in your phone or that kind of thing can be very helpful. I've actually known people that will, when they get in the room with the physician and they've got all this information that they want to, number one, share, and then also information that they need to hear,
Right.
they'll ask if they can record the conversation with their phone. Smart. And then that way, you know, that can also help if somebody's not there with you. Mm-hmm. But even if somebody comes with them, they'll still ask if they can record the conversation just so they can have it to go back and reference and get that information later. So another That's very helpful advice. Way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have even thought about recording it, but that makes perfect sense. So, well, as we're kind of wrapping up today, we've got about 5 minutes left. And so thinking about that, now you oversee a big team at Hope Cancer Resources. You do a lot of things. So talk to us a little bit about your team and some of the ways in which you guys are able to help cancer patients.
So we have social workers that have a presence in each one of the Highlands Oncology clinics. Mm-hmm. And so with each patient that gets a recent cancer diagnosis, they are scheduled to see a social worker. Now, sometimes through, you know, cancellations or redoing schedules and that kind of thing, we may miss somebody, but anybody is able to come into our office at any of the clinics, and they are able to talk to a social worker, get an assessment, and then talk about what resources they may be eligible for. Okay. If you're not in the clinic, you can call our primary number for Hope Cancer Resources, and you can talk to a case manager that can do the exact same thing. Okay. So that's very helpful. We also do counseling at Hope Cancer Resources. We have our main offices there, but you can also do telephone counseling or virtual counseling if that's something that you need. And again, we see patients, we see their family members, and we see caregivers. Wow. So, with all of that being said, we also provide support groups for mainly it's all patient driven at this point in time. We have a women's support group for women under 50 with any kind of cancer diagnosis. We have a men's support group. We have a multiple myeloma support group that's been going for many, many years. We have a advanced cancer support group, which is called Living in Legacy. And hopefully by the end of this year, our Spanish-speaking support group will be back up and running.
That's exciting.
Yes,
Wow.
it is.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about something you said earlier and survivorship. So I read something earlier and it said survivorship includes not only physical recovery, but cognitive and emotional well-being. And so I want to let that sit with you for a minute and then get your thoughts around that.
I think that is a very true statement in a lot of big ways, because I think that when people get to a place, well, first of all, this may be something that people don't know. Survivorship starts the day you get your cancer diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
it's not the day that you finish treatment.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the day that they tell you that you have no evidence of disease. It is the day that you get your cancer diagnosis, which I think some people find very surprising.
I'm kind of surprised.
I know that. So the thing that I would say is that cancer changes everything. And you are entering into something that you never thought you would have to deal with or hoped that you would never have to deal with. And once you get to a place where you can start to see that, you are really stepping into survivorship. And the emotional side of it and all of the things that have come with it and all of the changes that come with it.
Wow. Well, Shawnna, I can tell you have a lot of passion for this topic.
I do.
I appreciate you so much for being here with us today and for sharing about Chemobrain. For all of you listeners, I hope you share this with someone who could use it. And we thank you for tuning in to Hope Unscripted, and we'll see you next time.